All right. So let's take a look at how we can go and add in a sprite. All right. And what we'll do is we'll add in a sprite when the application loads. So let's look at that here. So let's add in a function, and I like to call this spawn sprite. And the way that I like to code personally is to divide everything up into these functions here. Now, a function for your purpose, you want to think of a function as an area where you can go and compartmentalize some code. So within this function here, we are going to do one thing: spawn the sprite. If we want to move the sprite, it will be a different function. So for example, we'll say function move sprite. Let's just say that is the function here that we're going to add in here. So we have spawn sprite, we have move sprite, and then we can have add a function something like delete sprite. You get the idea. Now, functions can do more than just spawn a sprite or keep code there. They can actually do some math, right? You can actually pass things into a function here. So let's say we wanted to pass in something like player size, and we can just make that something like an integer like this. And what will happen here is that if we wanted to pass in a specific size, we can type in player size, and you can see that it's an integer here. So as a result, you can pass things in here. You can also return values, but for now, all we're going to be doing is spawning a sprite. Okay, so in order to make this function work, in order to make this function actually spawn a sprite, we need to type in the word spawn sprite, and you can see that it says it's of type void. And within this function here, this did move to view, it will get called and when the app gets loaded. So override function did move to view. When the app loads, it will spawn the sprite. Right now we don't have anything that will spawn a sprite. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. We're going to add a variable. We'll call this player, right? And we'll make that equal to SKSpriteNode. And you can see that it's of type SKSpriteNode. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a question mark in two brackets here. And what that's going to do is that's going to say that this player here is now of type SKSpriteNode. Now we can go, and if we say player is equal to SKSpriteNode. Now, for those of you who kind of know what I'm talking about, I'm going to be moving that variable in just a second here. But for now, let's just go and let's add in the player here, and I'm going to show you a huge productivity tip in just a second here. Now, as I type in the bracket, you can see that there's all these different options here. Now, if you want to add in an image, you want to add in this image name here, and we can say spaceship, okay? Just like that. Now, the thing is that it is case sensitive. So if we go over to our assets.xcassettes, you can see that spaceship is spelt like this. So that's spaceship, all one word, first letter capitalized. If you misspell it or you add in, let's say, an extra capital, it won't use that graphic. It is case sensitive here, okay? So we have an image name here. We're going to say player.size. Now this is really important here. You see that size is of type CG size. And with Xcode, you have to understand that when you have a specific data type, in this case it's CG size, you have to pair it with a CG size. It's kind of like apples and oranges. You want to make sure that CG size is equal to a CG size. Now, we're going to add in a CG size here, and we're going to say width and height. You can see that there is two widths of CG float, two widths of double, and two widths of integer. Now, what this means is that you either have the option of adding in two CG floats, two doubles, and two integers. What's a CG float? What's a double? What's an integer? A CG float is a type of variable which you can add in decimals. It's a number variable that you can add positive or negative decimals. Same thing with double, except for the CG float is just a different kind of variable where you can use decimals. Think of it like apples. This one's, the double is a green apple, and the CG float is a red apple. They're both apples, but they're slightly different kinds of apples. And integers are only positive or negative whole numbers. Now, it doesn't matter which one you pick of these, as long as they're the same type here. So let's give this a size of 50 by 50. Now I push tab, and you want to get used to having your finger on that tab key. One thing I like to do when I'm building any kind of software is run productivity tips, right? When I build an app or a game, I'm blazingly fast at it because time is money. So you want to make sure that you want to find productivity tips that work for you. And the best way to use your keyboard to do this is to use the keyboard. So first of all, we have a player. We have a image for that player. We have a size for that player. Okay. We also need a position. So we're going to go to player dot position. Okay. And by the way, you can add in a whole bunch of cool things here. You can add in the X scale, you can add in the position, you can change the alpha, which is how transparent it is. But there's all these different kinds of extensions you can add to this. But we're just concerned with position for now. All right, and you can see that, by the way, position is a type CG point. So let's type in CG point. And the CG point is a coordinate. Now, if you remember back to math class, you have X coordinates and Y coordinates. And if you give a coordinate, if you give two numbers of there, you can plot it somewhere on a 2D plane. Again, this is the same thing where we have a float, we have a double, and we also have an integer. So float, double, integer. We're just going to select integer for now. And we can say that we want to put this right in the middle. So how do we do that? Well, we could guess and say it's 500, 500. We could do that, or we could add in something that's native to Xcode. So we're going to type in cg rect get mid x. Okay. What this is going to do is that it's going to find the middle x, and remember, x is across the screen. So if we go to self.frame, what that's going to do is that's going to put it in the middle. So it's going to put it in the middle. Now, if I push tab here, what it should do is we should go to cg rect get mid y, and we're going to go to self dot frame. So self dot frame here. We have our position, and that will put it in the middle of the y here. Now, if you want to add in a number here, this will add it to the top. You can add in these things called offsets. So if you don't want it exactly in the middle, but you want to say middle plus a bit or middle negative a bit, you can go ahead and do that as well, right? And what are these numbers here that I'm adding in? They're pixels. So if you want it 200 pixels above, you're more than welcome to do that. Or if you want it 200 pixels below, you can subtract it. Let's just put it right in the middle. Okay, now we're almost ready to do this here. We're almost ready to go to self.addChild, and we're going to go to type in player with an exclamation point. All right, and what that's going to do is that is going to allow us to add in our player. So to recap, we've spawned the sprite, and within this function here, we set up everything that we need to know. Let's take a look at this. Now again, I'm going to give you an optimization tip in just a second, but we want to see if this works. Okay, and sure enough, we have our spaceship here. Okay, now one thing I like to do is I like to take out my variables and I like to put them outside the class. What does this do? This means that I can access player anywhere, right? So if I want to be in this override function here, I can access player. Okay, you could not do that in this function here. Whenever you declare a variable, and a variable is like a piece of data, whenever you declare a SK sprite node, a variable, anything like that, within curly brackets, you can see these are curly brackets, you can only use that in the curly brackets here. So let me demonstrate that for just a second here. So we're going to say player, and if I type in player, you can see that it doesn't work. In fact, it's going to come up with a big error. Okay. So we have our nice player here, and we want to put that outside. I like to make sure most of my variables and constants that I'm going to declare are outside here. What is a constant? A variable is something you can change throughout the course, and a constant you cannot. So sometimes like gravity, you want to make a constant. All right. So we now have a spaceship one thing we're going to look at is this UI color and CG size. Okay, so the UI color here is of type UI color. Now, if we want to add in a color, let's add in a variable here. We'll call this player color, and we'll make it to a UI color dot orange color. So we'll make it an orange color here. So within this UI color, we can add in player color. Okay, we've declared this variable player color as UI color, and it's an orange color. UI color is how Xcode specifically deals with color, and this is only one way you can use color, but this is the one that we're going to use for now. All right, we're going to add player color, and we can also add a CG size. Now we could add another variable here. We can call this player size. We'll make it equal to a CG size, and we'll make it, well, 50 by 50. Okay, and for here we can say player size. Now you're wondering, this player.size here, do we need it anymore? The answer is no, because we've already set up the size. Now let's just take a quick look at this here. So we'll run everything here, and you'll see that we now have, well, this nice orange square at the end of it here. The position is still the same. Let's go ahead and let's do one more thing before we end this tutorial, and that's change the background color. So we're going to add in a var. We'll call this background color custom. And I'm adding in that custom because we're making a custom color. We're going to make it equal to a UI color, and a UI color, we'll add in a bracket here, and we'll add in, you might have to scroll down, we'll make it an RGBA value. What's an RGBA value, you might ask? An RGBA value is where you add in a red, green, or blue value of a value between 0 and 1, and an alpha is the transparency. So for example, if we said this was 0.2, tab 0.2, tab 0.2, this will give it a gray color. If the red, green, and blue values are all the same number, it will be a shade of gray. 0 is the least, which will be black, and 1.0 is the top, and it will be white. Alpha is how transparent it is, and just to explain how that works, I'm going to do 0.5. So, and for example, and what might be a bit better here is we'll just make it 1.0, and if we want to make the background color, we need to go to our did move to view. We're going to go to self.background color is equal to UI color, or we can just say background color custom, and you can see that background color custom is a UI color. Now the reason why I added in custom is because there's already a background color, and you can say background color defaults to gray, and then background color custom is the one that we set up specifically. So let's take a look at that here, and you'll see that we have a nice dark gray and this orange here. Let's add in one more item here. We'll call this var off white color. We'll make it equal to UI color. And within here, we're going to say that this is 0.95. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it and paste it again. And I'm going to add 1.0. We'll be using off white color in another tutorial. But that is how you set up a sprite in SpriteKit. This concludes the tutorial.